Hello and welcome to Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. I'm Chloe Cho. I recently offered to host a dinner at home for a group of friends. Little did I know that it would turn into a culinary challenge. One of my mains was supposed to be the Spanish dish paella, but there was an issue. One guest was a vegetarian, another a pescatarian, the third was reintroducing carbs into his meals after being on a high-protein diet, and the fourth was on 16/8 intermittent fasting and offered to make adjustments for the dinner. That meal underscored the realities of today, as so many of us are keen on clean, healthy, and sustainable living. Diet fads are no longer a passing phase. As eclectic as people's eating habits become, how do professional chefs go about it? Especially if you're a pastry chef. On top of all the trends and fads, how do you deal with the backlash over sugar, dairy, gluten, and a lot of other things? That is what I'm about to find out from Janice Wong, a top Singapore pastry chef, as we meet at a cafe on Orchard Road where the usual bustling crowds were nowhere to be seen due to coronavirus concerns. Hi, good morning, Janice. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
A little bit stressed out about the coronavirus?
Yeah, I'm not stressed out, but now we're really putting a lot of our creative input and also energy into doing things different, diversifying our offerings. That's kind of what the team is doing, keeping the energy up high.
I remember when I ran into you a few months ago, you said, yeah, let's talk in June. And you're supposed to be in Kazakhstan, cooking up a storm at the famous Ritz-Carlton. But that got pushed back. Everything is getting canceled, thanks or no thanks to the coronavirus.
Women's Day is a big thing for me. I mean, every year I have lots and lots of activities, and was really to showcase myself as a pastry chef, and especially in Kazakhstan where it was all food and art related. And I wanted to showcase that part to that part of the world.
Yeah, it's a bummer that it got canceled. Thanks to the cancellation, I have a chance to talk to you. I've been following your journey for the past few years. We even did a TV show together. What really trips me up nowadays is that you have so many fads or trends. Veganism, vegetarianism. You have people going keto, pescatarian. I mean, it confuses me. And I imagine for somebody like you, you're running a very cosmopolitan operation. You now have shops in Singapore, Tokyo, Korea, and even a shop in Harrods, London. What's that like? Is that a challenge? Because you're so creative and innovative.
We always are very versatile with our offerings. We're able to adapt, but we can't really change those confectionery offerings. Whereas the desserts, the progressive desserts on a plate, we could change that across the different cities, across events. So because of all these trends, I've been really trying to develop more and more vegan recipes. Of course, in Singapore, it's different because we are halal here, right? As well, we need to consider that there are Malays here. So we always have this restriction.
You initially started out with the restrictions from halal, but now you're going to a different territory, trying to cater to the keto, paleo, veganism, and so on and so forth. And also, not only that, you have people who can't eat dairy. Sugar is seen as the number one enemy. Then eventually, what do you cook with?
Maybe about a decade ago, that diabetics was the main thing. I mean, so I've always cooked with less sugar. Before this keto trend came about, there was a dessert called the Cassis Plum. It was featured on MasterChef season 7, and that dessert had no added sugar. So, I mean, you really use fresh fruits. You use, for example, yogurt. There is a way to create innovative, healthy, delicious desserts that are not so poisonous to the body. And I myself am a big fan of healthy living. So we incorporated a lot of vegetables in our desserts in Japan. Mushrooms. We even have beets. We have pumpkin, all sorts of vegetables. And the Japanese love it.
But is it a challenge getting the right texture? Or even perfecting the taste? Because I know that you're a real stickler for fine-tuning, for getting that taste and texture right.
You can say that, but in Japan, it's quite easy because the fruit and the herbs themselves, they are really delicious. Just really roast the pumpkin or you steam it and it's perfect texture. The kombucha in Japan is so sweet and delicious in itself. It's just really finding the right ingredients. And I use a lot of bitter notes.
What is that?
We use like burdock, we use sataimo, which is also a very sticky root vegetable. And then we incorporate it with other types of bitter notes. We use very, very bitter chocolate. And we introduced that in Singapore. One of my dishes have a very, very bitter chocolate in it, and it works.
The self-professed chocolate lover prefers it in deep, dark, original form, yet has been working on a vegan formula by replacing dairy with coconut oil or fat. For vegan desserts in general, Janice says the key is to swap gelatin made from pork products, bones, or cartilage with algae, fish gelatin, or agar, a jelly-like substance derived from seaweed species. Given the many dietary restrictions on request, the Singapore pastry chef sometimes creates two versions of desserts. The original and the alternative that skips such ingredients is alcohol and bakwa, the Chinese salty sweet dried meat similar to jerky. Which ingredient blew you away the most?
I would say the development of chocolate. It's a fruit. Who in their right mind would make it black? Really manipulate it, ferment it in banana leaves, make it like completely dark, and then after that roast it. When they cooked it in the past, it was extremely bitter. They didn't have the proper way of fermentation yet, and it was a very bitter, thick drink. And the Aztecs would mix it with chili and honey. I just loved it so much, and I knew that I had to come up with my own line of chocolate.
How did you go vegan with chocolate?
You can take out the dairy portion out of it. It's quite unique. Even if you put coconut oil, coconut fat into it, it's just different. I love my chocolate like nice and rich, and I like it 99%. But when you manipulate it, I've tasted vegan chocolates before. Have you tasted them?
No, I don't think so. I'm all about the original indulgence.
The original, right? Well, it serves the people who are vegan well, but to me, it's great to have that diversity.
What was the most challenging dessert that you made based on all these restrictions that you stumble into nowadays?
Well, remember we did one event together, one of the most stressful ones, because you have a whole list of dietary restrictions, which is absurd. And to be honest, I say absurd because when it comes to dessert and they see the beautiful dessert on the plate, they go like, oh, okay, I'm not vegetarian anymore. I'm not vegan. No, I can take gelatin. No, I can do that. And suddenly the vegan is not vegan anymore at night.
You've started as a feature chef in some of the MasterChef TV shows, right? What are some of the craziest or the most delectable desserts that you've created?
So what I'm most proud of is actually creating desserts out of no reference. It's really understanding ingredients, what flour, sugar, water, eggs, starch, what it does to the dessert, how it incorporates, what type of textures you will have to make a cake, or whether it's steamed or baked, and they're all different applications. So learning that is so important. So I've been doing desserts that are based on no reference, so really unique recipes that you'll never find anywhere in the world. For example, our chocolate water dessert. It's basically 45% chocolate, 45% water, 10% egg white. And it's been great because we actually create a texture of a mousse that is very healthy.
It's almost kind of becoming like a chemist because it's no longer about cooking. It's about understanding the texture. How long did that take you in figuring out even how flour or how even honey or water, how that can be broken down into something else, completely transformed?
This is something that you're continuously doing consciously every day when you're working with the ingredients, and sometimes a spark of an idea will come to you. How this ingredient will help to make the air pockets of the chiffon cake better, for example. Folding a little bit of oil into the chiffon cake, what does it do? It's definitely chemistry in baking.
Is Janice continues to experiment with her ingredients using different techniques. She credits her international upbringing in Japan and Hong Kong for awakening her taste buds at an early age, helping to lay the foundation for her culinary adventure. You spent some time in Japan and also Hong Kong international schools, right? You moved around a little bit while you were growing up. Did that experience open up your eyes as a teen, as a child, to the possibilities out there?
For sure. I think if I lived in Singapore all my life, my world would have been very different. I was able to really go to the markets at a very young age. I was able to have a taste of fish, rice, and seaweed in my mouth when I was 3. And that type of taste and flavor and diet as a young kid, it's not something familiar in Singapore. So I was really able to incorporate different levels of spices as well when I was a kid. Like Hong Kong is spicy, Singapore is spicy, but when you go to Japan, it's not so spicy. So I guess very sensitive to taste, flavor, and this bank of flavors in my memory is just helping me throughout my career.
Having grown up in Japan, you spent about 4 or 5 years there. That probably gave you the comfort level to branch out to Japan when you first opened up your overseas outlet, right?
I've always had my eyes on Japan. It's a very, very mature audience, and I felt the most alive when I was there because there were critics everywhere. I mean, your normal, average consumer, they have eaten so much confectionaries, and they really know their ingredients from all over 47 prefectures of Japan. So you better not manipulate it too much. So I studied a lot. I mean, I'm still studying now. I'm actually studying ice, which is the craft of water, which is the craft of kakigori. It's a shaved ice dessert, and it's all about the texture of the water.
Kind of like the Korean bingsu, right?
Yeah, you can say that as well. I was very inspired by that because actually kakigori is a very healthy dessert. It's basically a lot of water, and I'm a big fan of water. I've used water in my desserts since I was young. Since we started in 2007, people can never believe that we substitute cream and we use water instead.
How can you turn water into cream?
We whip cream to give it texture, to hold it together, to make the mousse. But you can actually make mousses out of water instead of cream.
What do you add?
Sometimes I would add a touch of egg white powder, but you're looking at 0.1% of the mixture. And that actually stabilizes it. I can add other types of stabilizers now, like we have Pro Espumas. All in all, it's very interesting to keep pushing the boundary to ensure that you give customers the right experience without it being too much in their face. So we don't actually say that we use a lot of water or less sugar because it just seems too healthy.
Why don't you promote that message? It's a great marketing tagline because in this world where people are so afraid of sugar, customers who might have otherwise shunned a plate of your wonderful tarts or cakes or pies, they might actually take a second serving.
It's always very complex to say, okay, we're gonna now tell people we use less sugar, but it's been 12 years that we do that, and it's not that the entire menu has less sugar. I think we offer about 2 or 3 desserts that have completely no sugar in it, no added sugar. The rest of the desserts are pretty indulgent.
And now here you are today, already a seasoned veteran. Did you expect what you were creating to be this successful? I know that it first began with dessert bar in Holland Village in Singapore. Was that a kind of a surprise? Because Singaporeans are known for being more savory fans rather than having that sweet tooth.
I mean, now being a veteran, I would have done a few things different.
Like what?
Sure. For one, I would have might have chosen a different name. I think calling it 2 a.m. dessert bar is extremely unique. You only have the perception of like dessert offerings only. Not so much of, oh, I can come here for sandwiches and stuff or pastas. We were very blessed to be able to open until 2 a.m. Whereas in Japan, I really struggled because, my restaurant in Japan had to open 10 a.m. and close at 10 p.m. last order because we were in the mall. But whereas, 2 a.m., you really don't have to chase customers out after dinner. They can enjoy a glass of wine, They come in, they want their churros and hot chocolate. We've been selling out churros this week. It's been really, really strange. But it's been consistently on our menu for 12 years, which is also quite unheard of in Asia to actually have a dessert restaurant that is 12 years. Yeah.
Especially in this city, fickle city called Singapore, where
Totally,
restaurants
yes.
come and go in such a quick time.
I mean, our team is really, really good. They've been with me a while, and my head chef, he's been around for 11 years out of the 12 that we've opened. They really understand the way we operate. The lab and the creative spirit is not in one place. They travel with me, and one of them is meant to travel with me to Kazakhstan, absorbing all that new culture and then bring it onto the table.
As passionate as Janice is about being creative with her desserts, the economics major has learned to steady the business once it got off the ground, initially relying on the financial backing of her father for the initial startup capital, and has learned what the recipes for disaster are when running the operation. You are a big celebrity chef, yet at the same time, you're quite the entrepreneur as well. You're an economics major, right? So does that help?
Definitely helps, especially a crisis like this. It has helped a lot. We actually already started cutting costs last year. Somehow I had this gut feeling like things were going to slow down after Valentine's Day. Cost is always one of the things that you have to be extremely cautious of. And that's where the economic side of me comes in, the business side. In a confectionery business, numbers is key. You need to sell thousands of units and not just only 1,000 units. And we're trying to always ensure that price points are very, very competitive so that we are able to move these numbers.
Initially, when you got started, I believe it was your dad, a former bond trader. He plunked down about 350,000 Singapore dollars, which is roughly about 270,000 US dollars, to get you off the ground. Was he sort of like the father figure, like the chairman, so to speak? How does that dynamic work?
I was very blessed to have that, but I wanted to repay him. That was the main goal. But he always allowed me to fail. And I think if I'm a parent in the future, that is the one single thing that I've taken off this whole journey with my parents.
But when did you fail? You were successful from a young age.
We have challenges every single day. My first challenge was not opening the restaurant in time. You're spending thousands of dollars just having your staff hanging in there. I did not get enough electricity. And when I opened for a pre-cocktail reception for a wedding party, 40 guests, and we had a blackout on the first day of operation, and that was insane for me. I knew that I did not do enough due diligence to check that. My father would have easily, for example, contacted people, get his electricians in, help me out. But no, I think he knew he needed me to find my own solutions. Even up to now, I would talk to him and I would tell him, okay, I have this market who's interested in us. What do you think of it? And he would never ever give me a direct answer.
Very interesting. It's never do this or do that. I know this market better than you.
Correct. He's lived in Hong Kong for 9 years. When Hong Kong did ask us to go in, I basically analyzed it myself, even though I did ask my dad, what do you think of it? He knows Pacific Place and all of that inside out. I said, okay, we're already in 2 very, very developed markets. I'm going to focus all my time into those markets and Singapore. And expanding to 5, 6 is easier, but these days it's easier because you can have partners to help you do that. But spreading yourself too thin is a recipe for disaster.
When did you learn that you should not spread yourself so thin? It seems like you've had a smooth ride all the way.
In 2016, we opened a restaurant in Singapore at the National Museum of Singapore, and then we also opened Japan in Shinjuku. We opened in Hong Kong and Macau. It was a lot, and it was a demand of new menus every single season, and we were creating 1,000 over SKUs. They're individual items. We developed like 25 ice creams, pancakes, waffles, cakes, mochis, everything sweet, you name it, is in Macau. We had 100 desserts per year in Japan. It's insane. You can never achieve the level of perfection with the amount of creative work, that volume of creative work that we were pushing out. So we had to take a step back and focus on the markets that were really key to us.
When you come up with these recipes, when you're creating 1,000 dessert varieties, how do you do it? I mean, you're kind of following that Zara or H&M model. Consumers are demanding more.
Definitely. And that's why we're always researching every single day, including this downtime at a very high price, though. I mean, I'm researching on Paranica and Quays and all that right now. I'm researching on eyes and kakigoris, all because I know that I'm going to be able to use that when I need that in the future.
As Janice dedicates her time to research and development, preparing for a pickup in consumer sentiment, the 36-year-old chef-cum-entrepreneur is pensive about work-life balance that's remained elusive for the past decade. When she's not in the kitchen or in the office, she pours her passion into edible art, painting, designing, and conceptualizing artworks on canvas or installations using marshmallows, bubble gum, and many other edible items, transforming her studio as well as other galleries and commission spaces. Do you ever have any time for some personal life?
Thanks to COVID now, yes, I do. The last 3 weeks was the first time in 10 years that I feel completely at ease because for the first time, I don't have exhibitions going on, non-stop events, and there's no way you can say no to it because you run a big company and you have to pay staff and you have to put a lot of resources back into R&D.
It seems like you've been working non-stop for the past 12 years. Do you think about whether you want to tie the knot? I remember I met this billionaire lady in Thailand. She had inherited this money and she grew it so big and decked out entirely from head to toe Chanel. And she was pushing 60. Very attractive, very well-spoken, internationally educated, cosmopolitan, all of those things. And I remember having a conversation with her and she said that it's really, really challenging for a woman to find a suitable partner when you're at that level. I mean, here she was building new things, $300 million there, $500 million there. And then she kind of settled on the point that her company, her staff, were her family. Do you get worried that you get bound and you get married to your business?
Yeah, for sure. People tell you you're married to your work. And at 30, you think nothing of it. Yeah. I'm 36 now. And yeah, I think when I was 35, I started to really feel it. That made me a little bit anxious. But then I'm like, you know what? I thoroughly love everything I've done in the last decade. I would never trade anything else for it. I've got a great family, both at work and also my own family. I've been through a relationship. I need someone who is supportive of what I do, who truly understands why I do certain things. And sometimes you can never understand why somebody would want to put 200 kilos of marshmallow on a ceiling. I mean, that's the type of craziness that not everybody can understand and say, okay, I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm going to be painting some walls with chocolate. So it takes quite a bit, but I'm pretty certain that the person will come along.
Do you find that when success came to you fairly early in your mid to late 20s, that men get intimidated? Because you're a chef, but you're also an entrepreneur.
Yes, a few men would get intimidated because as a women boss, you really do make decisions fairly quickly, very assertive. You don't really beat around the bush. Yeah, it's a little bit scary, but I'm pretty sure that there's a big pool of men out there.
Do you have a type? Just in case if I stumble into anybody, I might make the intro. I've done stuff like that in the past.
Someone who's very supportive. It's not someone who's soft. Someone who can take a step back and say, okay, I'm going to do this with you. If one day I said, okay, I'm going to go to this country to cook for 1,000 kids in need, for example, that person would be able to do that with me and put aside his own work. I think that's a big sacrifice sometimes that men cannot do for women.
As the virus scare throws up a lot of uncertainty with even plans for a pop-up up in the air at a big mall in Osaka, Japan for the Olympic Games in Japan, Janice is learning to take the latest storm in her stride. Having weathered the fallout from power trips in early days to even typhoons, earthquakes, and tsunamis late last year.
I'm due to have a pop-up at the Olympics season That was asked by one of the biggest malls in Osaka. If that doesn't go true, I mean, now everything's on standstill over there, then it will definitely hurt the momentum that we're built in Japan. Korea has closed the theme park that we're in.
Since you're running a dessert business mostly, people would think that you're kind of sheltered from the storm, the virus storm, but you're not. The world is such a bizarre place.
Last year, I had to deal with the earthquake and the tsunami that happened in October in Japan. We had to close for like days, and safety first always. But weathering through these downtimes, it's always a time to really look at how we can take that time and make use of that instead of just resting at home and do nothing.
So when you were starting out, and your dessert bar in Holland Village started going really well and you started getting all this traction, did you think that it would be so challenging that you'd have to worry about tsunamis and earthquakes and viruses? Maybe a great piece of advice for other chef entrepreneurs.
When you're small, you're able to control. You're controlling your costs and everything. You only really feel the pinch when you're basically global. And when it's a global situation like this, that's when you really need very deep pockets to be able to sustain it through and ensure that you come out of it better than what you were before. 10 years ago, I started out with 7 and now I have 30 people. And it's important to grow your brand with key partners. That's actually how we weather through situations like that. And we help each other out a lot. Staying small, staying creative, being versatile in situations like that to be able to create when a crisis happens.
Janice plans to go away to Australia for a week, rent an apartment with friends, and bury herself in the kitchen as she experiments trying a new culinary technique of steaming desserts. By the way, as for what happened to my own challenge behind the kitchen with the Spanish dish, the vegetarian paella actually turned out very well after I replaced chicken with sea kelp and vegetables for the stock. Rave reviews from all of my guests as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this journey into the culinary world of renowned pastry chef Janice Wong. Join us next week for another fascinating episode on Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. Hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast with a friend. Do give us a quick review, and if you're on social media, do reach out to me and let me know what you think of the podcast. I'm Chloe Cho. Never stop dreaming.